Okay, welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class, the abbreviated Code of Jewish Law. Although today, instead of learning the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch inside the text, we'll start off discussing Lag Baomer, one of the most spiritually powerful yet perhaps not so well known days in the Jewish calendar. Okay, so we'll start off historically. So the first thing that happened on I'm sure lots of things happened in Lag Baomer. Adam and Eve did something that day, that year. But the first exciting part of recorded history is after the Jews left Egypt and they were 40 years in the wilderness until they got to Israel. So of course Hashem fed them man. Right, the manna, the bread from heaven, and the man started to fall on Lag Baomer. So that was the first day they got their man. So in general, this entire week, when we count the Sphira, let's just go back a step, right? When the Jewish people left Egypt, Hashem tells them in 50 days, I'm going to give you the Torah. Now, no one knew what was in it yet, but they knew it's from Hashem, so it must be amazing. So everyone was very excited. And of course, they started counting the days. Imagine you're going on a trip to Israel or something, so you count down the days. It's very exciting. Or if you're having a wedding, you count down the days. And then... But our ancestors in their wisdom did not count down like we normally do. Normally, when there's something exciting, 10 days to go, 9 days to go, 8 days, we count down. They started counting up. Why did they count up? Because they realized that to get the Torah is not a nothing. So you have to prepare yourself. And so therefore, they not only counted the days, they counted their progress in preparing themselves for the giving of the Torah. So today is the first day of the Omer. I prepared myself 1 step, right? Today's the second day of the Omer. I prepared myself 2 steps. So that's the Omer in general. And each week of the Omer, we focus on one midah, one attribute of our soul. Now this week is the week of Hod. So, to adequately summarize a Kabbalistic concept, it'll probably take 10 of these classes, just for the summary. So we're going to do a gross oversimplification, and we're going to say that it's a focus on humility. Now, it's obviously far more than that, but one of the ideas is we work on our humility. Now, those who look at this when they count the Sphira, will notice that each of the 7 weeks, and we focus on one midah, one attribute, but they're intermingled. So for an example, the first attribute is chesed. It's often translated as kindness, but here it means the idea of giving, of sharing, and so the first night is the chesed shebechesed, right? There's kindness of kindness, right? But then it intermingles. So we have gevura shebechesed, the strictness or the judgment of chesed. Just again, oversimplification. An example of this is sometimes in parenting, we have to discipline our children. Now, we don't do that because, we love, disciplining. It's because since we love our children and we want them to grow up with normal, healthy boundaries, and we want them to be able to be a mensch, so we have to teach them that certain behaviors are appropriate, certain things aren't appropriate. So even though we're being strict with them, we're actually doing it out of love. The proof is if you saw some stranger in the street, so a child that you have never met before, doing the same thing, chances are you're not going to get involved. Because now, at the end of the day, since you don't love this person, you've never met them before, you don't really care what they do. So why do we care about what our children do? Because we love them. And therefore, sometimes we'll be strict with them, but it's out of love. So that's gevurush v'chesed. That's a strictness of love. So the week of Hod, which is, we started counting this last Sunday. The week of Hod, as we said, gross oversimplification is humility, but it's also an idea of, it's called in the Zohar, the gates open, right? It's a time where certain revelations have the power to come into the world that don't normally have the ability to do so. So the gates open this week, and this is why something like the this manna from heaven, could come down in this week, because these gates open to blessings godly revelations that don't normally happen. And Lag Baomer is the Hod Shebahod, right? So we have a chesed, a kindness of Hod, we have a gevura Shebahod, we have a strictness of Hod. But so Lag Baomer is the epitome, the absolute extreme of this midah. And that's why we'll discuss in a little more detail shortly. But parts of the Zohar were revealed on this day. This is when revelations of secrets of the Torah were able to become public. Right. So the first thing that happened, as we said, was the man came down. Now we'll focus on the bigger ones first. So during the period of counting the Sphira, we also observe mourning. We cut, not out of obligation. Thank God. Hopefully, no one was actually in mourning this week, in this past few weeks, but as a custom. Because what happened is Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest scholars of all Jewish history, he had 24,000 students. Now, this was the cream of Jewish scholarship. Talking about a kollel, an advanced, 24,000 students. It didn't include preschool. We're not saying a huge. Now, preschool is also important. Don't get me wrong. But what I mean to say, though, wasn't some massive academic institution that had preschool and first grade. This was the postgraduate rabbinical program. You had the top of the generation, 24,000 students. And unfortunately, they all passed away in a period of approximately 33 days. Why? So, well, physically, the reason is that there was a plague. But spiritually, the cause for that is they did not show the proper respect to each other that they should have. Now, sometimes children misunderstand this when we teach in school, and they think that these students were actually nasty to each other. That's not true. They were very polite and dignified to each other. However, as the cream of the crop, the top echelon of Jewish scholarship, the expectations from them were greater than for regular people. And according to their potential, they didn't treat each other respectfully, right? They didn't treat each other the way that they should have. And one of the interesting things in Judaism is that sometimes the greater the person, the more that they are held accountable. If we just give an example, So Moshe was not able to take the Jewish people into Israel. Now, what happened, of course, is he hit the rock. Now, what's the actual story? 40 years almost earlier, almost 40 years, let's call it 39 and a half, they didn't have water. So Hashem tells him, go out and there's a certain rock and you're going to hit it. And out of this rock is going to come water. So he takes his staff and he hits the rock and water starts flowing out of the rock. And whenever they traveled, the rock went with them, right? We always say it's the original rock and roll because it rolled after them. And so they had this water, and when Miriam passed away, Moshe's sister Miriam, the prophetess, was in her merit that we had this well. It's called Miriam's well. It stopped flowing. And very quickly, they ran out of water. So Hashem tells Moshe to go speak to the rock. So he gathers everyone, and he, as he's instructed to, gathers everyone around, and he speaks to the rock. Now, unfortunately for Moshe, he was speaking to the wrong rock. Now, I don't know if it had to do with being 120 years old, and maybe his eyesight wasn't what it used to be, and the combination of that and that many rocks in the desert all look the same.
No, he says, his eyes didn't go bad. He was 120 later.
I understand, but it's that's true. He was still functioning. He had functioning eyesight. But I was just saying perhaps it wasn't as sharp as it once was. And whatever it is, he was speaking to the wrong rock. And after speaking to it once or twice, nothing's happening. He thinks to himself, last time Hashem told me to hit the rock. Maybe I'm meant to hit it again. So he hits the rock and a little trickle comes out. Oh, so he hits it again. Now a little more comes out, hits it a third time, and it starts flowing like it did before. And Hashem is disappointed in him because Hashem's plan was he should speak to the rock. Because if you can have something like a rock that just by being spoken to, it'll change its entire nature and now give water, then all of our instructions in the Torah, Hashem just spoke to us. If a rock can follow verbal instructions, how much more so we can and should. But by hitting the rock, that opportunity was lost. Because most of us, if we get hit with a stick enough times, we'll also do what we're told. Right? But it's so that opportunity was lost. Yes, Susan.
So you're saying that because Moses didn't understand that he was doing the wrong thing, that's why Hashem decided that he was afraid to give the Torah?
No, we gave him the Torah. I'm going to give myself the Torah had been given 39 and a half or 39 and a quarter or third years earlier. But because of this, Moshe was not able to go into the land of Israel.
Oh,
the people.
Okay.
Now, and again, so the Torah uses the expression that Moshe got angry. Yeah, Ben, yes.
Can I add that Moses also was told before he went to speak to the rock, he was told to take the staff with him.
Correct. That's
and
right.
that, was the same like the first time he took the staff and hit the rock. Here, he told him, take your staff, but speak to the rock.
Right. Actually, it's a very important point.
But he had the staff in his hand.
Not only was it wasn't just he hit the rock last time, he was told to take the stick with him when he speaks. So all the more reason, that's why I thought maybe it's meant to hit it. But anyway, the expression that's used is became angry. Now, Moshe didn't become angry like a regular person becomes angry. We're talking about, a person sitting in traffic and someone cuts them off and they start getting, road rage and, when people start getting, hot under their collar and various things. He was actually reasonably calm. When we say that he got angry, it means by his incredibly high spiritual potential on his lofty level, his lack of judgment is the equivalent to if us regular people lost ourselves and then out of anger, not thinking clearly, would make an error in judgment and do the wrong thing. And so although he wasn't angry, but on his high spiritual level, it was the equivalent of us becoming angry. And this idea may sound unfair, but we all understand, there are certain things, sometimes, like a 1.5-year-old says, "You've got a funny nose," right? Or something like that. And we all laugh. We say it's cute, right? Then if a 10-year-old says the same thing, it's like, "You cheeky little child, how dare you speak to an adult?" And lots of other things. I always feel bad for the little baby, when you, after the nurse, you burp the baby and the baby burps and you say, good boy. And all of a sudden one day the same kid burps and you say, "You disgusting little child, don't you dare do that in public." It's in different stages in life, we have different expectations from people. And it's not only because we're older, it's because as we get older, we're expected to have matured, to have gained more wisdom, to be able to think through the consequences of our actions better. And it's not because of the passport age that we are expected to be better. It's because of our development as we go through life that we're expected to be better. And there are different expectations in different stages of our life. Yes, Susan.
Okay, so you're actually speaking about intellectual refinement.
Intellectual, emotional, it's a whole combination, spiritual. Well,
all wrapped up into one.
What I gave was probably intellectual, about the different stages of a child. But we're speaking about Moshe being held to a high expectation. It was intellectual, emotional, spiritual.
Okay.
It was everything. And because he was on such a high level, the same way, we might say, well, it's not fair. This 30-year-old, he's being held to a higher standard than a 5-year-old. And he could say, it's not fair. He's a human, I'm a human, it's the same thing. And because we'll all say that's ridiculous. It's as long as, someone is, people can be developmentally delayed or various things. We're not speaking about that. But as long as a person is a, normal person, whatever that means, although none of us are ever totally normal. We all have our little things. But generally speaking, because as long as there's a regular person, we understand there's different expectations from a 30-year-old than there is from a 5-year-old. So with this, we can understand that from someone of the caliber of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moses, such a spiritual giant is held to a higher standard, a different set of expectations than we are. And although for us, if Hashem would have said, go speak to the rock and take your staff with you, and spoke to the wrong rock, not realizing, and then it didn't work, and we might say it's a very logical thing. We might think, well, last time I hit it, maybe I meant to hit it again. Or then a few drops come out. Oh, so hitting it was the right thing. Hit it again. A little stream. Hit it again, and it works properly. So for a regular person, that might be a very logical assumption, and therefore they would have done nothing wrong. But someone on Moshe's caliber, who Hashem himself gave him lessons on every nuance on the Torah, how every extra letter or missing letter teaches us something. Hashem expected him to realize that when Hashem told him speak, it only means speak. So, it's very easy with 2020 hindsight to sit back and criticize Moshe, but he was capable of something only Hashem is perfect. Every human, even the greatest human, by definition, being human means you're finite, you're limited. Everyone will make mistakes, and Moshe made a mistake. He didn't deliberately do anything wrong. He wasn't nasty. He was, it was an error. Nevertheless, we've all made errors, and there's been consequences to those errors. And the consequence to this mistake was that he was no longer able to be the leader of the Jewish people to take them into the land of Israel. So now that we understand this concept, we can just apply it to Rabbi Akiva's students. They weren't Moses, but nevertheless, on there, if these were the elite of the Torah scholars in the world, the way that they should have treated each other should have been something so awe-inspiring. Regular people should have witnessed it and said, wow, look at that. I'm inspired to be a better human being now. And it's not that they were actually rude to each other, but in their Talmudic discussions, they had differences of opinion, and they didn't debate with the respect towards each other that Hashem expected from them. And eventually, they got sick, and they should have picked up on the message. And again, 2020 hindsight, it's always very easy to look back and say, well, you should have noticed the writing on the wall, so to speak. But when people are living through something, sometimes it's more difficult. And unfortunately, they passed away in a period of 33 days. David, yes.
Sorry. There's also this aspect that I heard, that their love of another Jew and their love for their colleagues was so great that they felt that they had to convince their colleagues of their own understanding of Torah.
Yes. So this was what I was speaking to when they debated with each other, that they didn't have the proper respect. So one of the excellent point that Dob points out, but what happened is because actually in a certain level, their lack of respect came from their love towards each other. That, again, there are certain people that you try to share your wisdom, and they're not able to listen. So you sort of say, who cares? I've given you the information. If you want to ignore it, that's your problem. But because they felt such a loyalty to each other, and this love they had as a group, and feeling, we are Rabbi Akiva students, they felt that they couldn't leave another student with a mistaken assumption, or what they felt was mistaken assumption. And they just pushed it too far. And again, we say this is 2020 hindsight, which is a very easy thing to do. So they passed away. Yeah, Susan.
I'm not sure I understand exactly what those 24,000 men did wrong. What
they did wrong is so if we look at it on our level first, before we and then we can apply it to spiritual giants. On our level, we may all debate a certain Jewish idea, and there's a way to debate and discuss. Shouting at people and calling them names.
Are you saying their egos got in the way? Is that what you're?
I'm not going to say the ego. Let's talk on our level, and then we'll move it up a level to them. So on our level, regular people level, you would say was ego got in the way, or regular people, and sometimes. Okay, I'm not talking about modern day politicians, because unfortunately, in most democracies, people essentially have to be very good liars even to get pre-selection, never mind get elected. So let's leave that aside. But in concept, what can happen is you can have people who truly believe in their country, truly want to do what is best in the best interest of their country, and yet they could have totally different opinions of what that means. of which direction to go, and they can debate vigorously, and sometimes a vigorous debate can cross certain lines, and it becomes a nastiness. Now that's regular humans. I'm sure, I wasn't alive when Rabbi Akiva students were, approximately 2,000 years ago, a little bit less. So, I don't know exactly what they said to each other and how they said it, but due to their lofty spiritual level, according to the expectations that Hashem had from them, according to their potential, they treat each other inappropriately. Now, it could be if regular people treated each other the same as they did, that would be okay. But according to their potential, and Hashem judges us, Hashem, assesses us based on our potential. You can imagine, you have this 6-year-old, and he does his first grade math test. He gets 100%, and everyone's very impressed. He even gets a certificate at school. Everyone's, a certificate of achievement. It's wonderful. When he's in college, if he gets 100% on the same first grade math test, no one really gets excited about that anymore. And if you're still only doing first grade math, we're actually going to call it a waste of potential. You're wasting your time. You need to do something each year. You're meant to develop and improve. And a college student, we have different academic expectations from him than we do from a first grader. And so these great holy people, there was different expectations from them than there is for us. And, I don't think they didn't call each other stupid and various things. But according to how they should have behaved relative to their high spiritual level, they didn't do that. So when I say approximately 33 days, it's not clear exactly, was it 33 days in a row, or was it 33 days of the Omer, but not Shabbos, not Rosh Chodesh, which essentially means the entire Omer period, because if you take out Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and Chol HaMoed, all the special days, you're left with 33 days. So was it 33 days in a row, or 33 days of the 49 days? Either way, no one passed away on Lag BaOmer. So if they passed away for 33 days consecutively, it means they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, which makes it a special day. If they did pass away throughout all 49, just only 33 of those days, so till then, Lag BaOmer was not known as such a special day. So that, it wasn't Shabbos, it wasn't Rosh Chodesh, so it was the only regular weekday that no one passed away. So whether they finished dying or they just didn't die, either way, nobody died on Lag BaOmer. And that made it an exciting time. So Isaac, did you have a question? Is your hand up?
Yeah, two things. One was on the point, I had the same problem that Ms. Rezig has in terms of, so what did they already do? And the question always was, the Chayev Misa for not being nice to somebody or not speaking with proper respect? And last week I heard a very good word. He said, no. Problem was that this was public. They publicly were like, and then it became a Chilul Hashem. For a Chilul Hashem, you're Chayev Misa. So that their attitude towards each other, because it became public, made it a Chilul Hashem, which is why they then deserved Misa. That was just a word that I heard last week.
Yeah, and this just to expand that a little bit, the idea, just again, you might not feel that should be enough, but just to give the concept, can imagine, God forbid, let's say there was a a Jewish person who unfortunately, for whatever reason, does not yet appreciate the value of mitzvahs, of kosher, and a person walked past and they saw them eating in McDonald's. So there's a degree of disappointment, but it's a one level. You can imagine if, God forbid, it was the community's rabbi who was sitting there eating McDonald's, right? It would cause far greater damage, right? So people see this, they'd be saying, "What?" Or that's the hypocrisy of teachers of Torah. That's it. I'm not interested anymore. It not only becomes a disappointment of an individual Jew doing something, it destroys the entire system.
Devastation, really.
That's right. And Rabbi Akiva's students were the rabbis. This was, as I said, this was the elite. Now, again, like I said, they didn't call each other names. They weren't actually openly rude to each other. But what the level of respect that they should have had, they didn't have. And this became, and then you can imagine again, God forbid, can have in a community, sometimes two rabbis disagree with each other. And their intents are totally for the sake of heaven. And they even are polite to each other about their disagreement. But community members take one side or another. And sometimes the community members don't behave as nicely as the rabbis did. And then what happened also over here, sometimes you had in this discussion certain other people joined one side or another side. It was a messy situation. Just to illustrate this point, there was a huge debate in the Jewish community about 300 years ago between Rabbi Yaakov Emden and Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz. Without going to the whole details, because we just want to get to this one particular story, but it tore European Jewry apart. When Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz passed away, his son asked him to promise that he would visit him in his sleep. He would visit him in his sleep from the next world and tell him about the next world. So again, another whole long story. It took 6 months till he came. Let's leave that aside. But when he finally came, one of the things that Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz's son asked him in the next world, he says, are they punishing Rabbi Yaakov Emden for persecuting you? He says, no, they're giving him the greatest reward. The son says, I don't understand. He was so outspoken against you. He says, he's getting the reward because although he was wrong, he made an error about me, but it was totally for the right reasons. He was just mistaken. He was totally altruistic. He wasn't trying to get fame or anything out of it. He said, however, the other people who joined in, and just to get into the action, right, there, unfortunately, it's a different story. Right, so this was also an aspect. So Mordechai, did you have a question? Did you put your hand up? Yeah. Just unmute and.
Yes, is there going to be, were you going to mention anything about Lag Baomer also being the yard side of one of Rabbi Akiva's surviving?
We're getting there.
Shimon Bar Yochai.
That's next. Going in order historically. Right.
Okay, because we once wrote to the Rabbi about some issue, and he replied, you can rely on Shimon Bar Yochai in time of need, which was a quote from the Gemara.
Yeah, great. So thank you for prodding us on. So the students passed away, and they either stopped dying or at least didn't die like Baomer. So that day became, can imagine the community tragedy, the shock of so many great people passing away in such a short period of time. So if the day that they stopped passing away, or at least didn't pass away, would have been, became a celebration. Now, Rabbi Akiva, just a side point to this, was quite advanced in years, and everything he'd built disappeared, like 2 months, it's all gone. Now you can imagine that a lot of people would have given up at that point. They said, I'm just going to retire. That's it, finished. He didn't. He started to rebuild. And who did he rebuild with? 5 very junior students, at least at that stage, junior. And can you imagine this Rosh Yeshiva, this head of a yeshiva of a kollel, 24,000 elite students. Now he's got 5. Right? You can imagine he just would have given up. He didn't. And these 5 students, all continuation of Torah we have today comes from them. Right? The Rabbi Meir was one of them. You could essentially call him the founding father of the Talmud. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is pretty involved as well, but Rabbi Meir was did the setup of the Mishnah as we have it. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as well as being very involved in the Talmud, was also a great teacher of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, of spirituality. So, and the other students are also highly involved in the spreading of Torah. Without these 5 students, we wouldn't have Torah today. It would have been lost.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I think most apropos to this group is the important thing to realize is, when did all of this happen to Rabbi Akiva? He was 40 and he was still like a rock. He was 24 years away. All of this happened after he was 65. So for senior citizens, you should have an extra kayach that he just lost 24,000 students, and he started a new yeshiva with 5 past the age of 65.
Yeah, it was actually closer to 100, but it's
24 twice.
Yeah, he was, but this is what happened. Anyway, so one of these students, Rabbi Shimon, whenever it says Rabbi Shimon in the Talmud without saying, there was more than one sage called Rabbi Shimon, but it says Rabbi Shimon ben someone. Whenever it just says Rabbi Shimon without saying which one, that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So I'm not going to say literally every single page of the Talmud, but pretty close. So you have Rabbi Shimon. This is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We'll come back to his incident with having to live in a cave for a while, which also he came out like Baomer. Let's leave that aside for a minute. Just want to speak about that. As well as being one of the great Talmudic sages, he was the father of the Kabbalah, meaning that although the Kabbalah was given on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, it was part of the oral explanation that Hashem gave to Moshe to teach the people. But this, I'm hesitant to call it mysticism, but deeper levels were not always taught. They weren't taught publicly. It was teacher to elite student. It was something that was only for the elite, few and far between. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai started to teach publicly. We say publicly, we don't mean a forum like this per se, but a much wider, a larger group of students. He prepared the Zohar. It's not all his teachings, so many of previous generations, but he essentially edited it, prepared it. Parts of it are his teachings. Perhaps the most famous part, generally people, when they speak about Lag BaOmer, one of the things they say, and it's not 100% accurate what they say, first I'll tell you what they say, then we'll fix it up. They say that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught the Zohar right before he passed away in Lag BaOmer. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the set of Zohar, but even if you had it and you started to read it and you were a speed reader, I'm not sure you could squeeze it all in on Lag BaOmer. It's a multi-volume work. But he taught a section called the Idra Rabbah, which means the greatest the great assembly, the large gathering. And it's a very deep part of the Zohar. It's in Parshas Nosoi in the Zohar, if you ever want to look it up. But it's that's what he taught on Lag BaOmer, and he passed away on Lag BaOmer. And before he passed away, he requested that it should be a day of rejoicing, because he was looking back. You know, he remembered when these 24,000 students passed away, and he's seen what has been rebuilt in the interim, and he just given over some of the teachings of what's now part of the Zohar of teacher Rabbi Kiva's teachings, and he's made it public for the first time, and he's looking back at the accomplishments in just one lifetime, how the Jewish people have bounced back, how the knowledge of Torah and you know, it would be a little bit like, you know, someone who was young at the time of the Holocaust, and they saw the destruction of all the great yeshivas in Europe, and then they look back at the end of their life and they see now, you know, before we speak about America and Australia, but just in Israel, the amount of yeshivas, that there are more people studying Torah today than ever before in Jewish history. It's just incredible. And you can imagine them looking back, and although, you know, no one's looking forward to the day that we go to the next world, and you know, we're not necessarily planning a celebration, but when we look back and see how much has been accomplished, and he was part of it, and not just part, an integral part. He was one of the main players. He is so overjoyed, and his passing was like sort of the end of that generation. And although people were sort of sad, you know, this is the end of the great generation of leaders who rebuilt us, he asked them to celebrate the accomplishments of this generation. And of course, as we said, it was he taught these secrets, which that in itself, again, this idea of revelation of this week of Hod, of things that are not normal, haven't been in the world till now, and now coming out to the open. It was an incredible time. Now, during Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life, there was no rainbow. So we know the rainbow is a covenant that was made with Noah after the flood, that if the world deserves in whole or part consequence, sort of like the flood, instead there's going to be a rainbow. And although when we see rainbows, they're beautiful, but sometimes, unfortunately, I'm not often surprised when I see one, because it's normally after you've seen certain things in the news and various things, and it's, a rainbow. Okay, but it's, you can imagine an individual that not only they were such a tzaddik themselves, but they had such an influence on their generation that in his lifetime, there was no rainbow. So that was an incredible thing as well. Because of this, it's one of the reasons many people have a custom on Lag BaOmer to shoot a bow and arrow, right? To play with a bow and arrow because of the rainbow. Another reason, just by the way, in Roman times, they made it illegal to teach Torah, and sometimes the teachers would take their students out to the fields and teach them. And when soldiers came by, they hid the scrolls and they pull out the archery sets. And the soldiers say to the teacher, you know, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm just teaching these young gentlemen some archery skills. And the Roman soldier says, good work, keep it up. And of course, once the soldiers move on, the bows went away, and out came the scrolls, and they started to study again. So many people are accustomed to use bow and arrow today. I got my kids, you know, the ones, my younger kids, so my older kids don't play with them, but you know, the not a point on the end, you know, it's got like a suction cap. Not a good idea to let the kids play with razor sharp arrows, you know, especially unsupervised. Nice little soft rubber That's what the kids should play with. Anyway, going out of order, a little bit back in history, there was a time where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had to run away from authorities. He said something true that they didn't like to hear. And, he first hid in a study hall. His wife was sneaking food, but then he got worried they'll capture his wife and torture her, God forbid, so he and his son disappeared to a cave in the middle of nowhere. And they hid in this cave. Hashem made a little stream flow through the cave, and there was a carob tree. All they ate was the carob from this tree for 12 years. And they studied Torah, and they worked on their spiritual development, and for 12 years. After 12 years, they get a message from Eliyahu Novi, from Elijah the prophet, that it's time to come out. Not indirectly, you get the message, right? You're standing outside the cave, and he says, how is Rabbi Shimon and his son Elazar going to know that it's time to come out of the cave? Right? All right. So they worked it out. So they come outside, and the first thing they see, so first we'll tell the story, then we'll discuss what's going on behind the story and what we can learn. But the Talmud tells us that they come out and they see people farming, and they're in shock. They've just spent 12 years, like the Jews in the wilderness, of 40 years with, it wasn't man floating down from heaven, but, I don't know how much carob grows on a tree, but I'm sure that it's less than I would eat in a year. And even if it was enough, how much carob can you eat already? Right? So, but miraculously they survived. And it's like the material world didn't exist for them anymore. All it was like being in an envelope of spirituality. And they came out and they were just in shock. How could people put aside their spiritual life, their true purpose for their livelihood? And everything they looked at was like, they're caught on fire. Whether that's a metaphor or literal, I couldn't tell you, but it was like they destroyed what they looked at. So they hear a heavenly voice. Hashem tells them, I didn't tell you to leave the cave to destroy my world. You're not ready yet. Go back in. So they go back into the cave, and they're told to come out a year later. And now only Rabbi Shimon's son, when he looks at things are destroyed. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai heals what his son destroyed. And then he calms his son down and says, you and I are enough for this world. Fine. Then we're told part 3 of the story. Not long afterwards, they're walking down the street. It's almost Shabbos. And they see an elderly gentleman, and he's rushing with 2 big bundles of myrtle leaves. So, in those days, people didn't bring their wife a bouquet of flowers for Shabbos. They brought a bundle of myrtle leaves. Made the house smell nice. It was a nice thing. So they see him. What are you? Where are you running to with these myrtle leaves? He says, for Shabbos. I'm bringing. I've cut them. I've got them already. I'm bringing them home for Shabbos. And they said, why 2 bundles? Isn't one enough? It says one for Zocher, one for Shoma, one, because we have 2 commandments about Shabbos, to remember Shabbos and to observe Shabbos. Just bring a bundle for each. And now Rabbi Shimon says, look how precious the mitzvahs are to the Jewish people. And he and his son, their minds were put at ease, put at rest, and they were content, and they were able to move on. So, what exactly happened here? Now, sometimes when we have a spurt of spiritual growth, we can't understand that not everyone had the same growth with us. Sometimes you see it, the certain people, they decide that they're physically fit enough, and they, start only eating healthy and going to the gym 27 times a day, and, whatever they're doing. And, after a year, they're like in tip-top super shape, and they see a regular person take a slice of chocolate cake at their son's birthday party, and like, oh, how can you eat that? Right? Now, it may work for them, but what they are missing is that, other people have different lives, different circumstances, different priorities at this moment, and not everyone's set of priorities matches up with theirs. And so this unfortunately happens, when people have a sudden burst of spiritual growth in a short time. Often they can't understand why people aren't on the same level they are on. Why aren't they doing that too? And interestingly, being a congregational rabbi, what you often find is the people who have the least patience in a shul for other members who are not yet keeping things properly are the ones that didn't do it themselves a few years back. In other words, the people who were raised in a home where Shabbos was kept and kosher was kept, they often have far more patience for other people than the people who only recently. Now, again, obviously exceptions to the rule and everyone's different. And you would think it would be the other way around, right? Someone who's been in a similar situation should have more understanding. But we see it's not the case, usually, because they've had this spiritual growth, and it's like, how can you still be there? We're here now. Well, what they really mean is, I'm here now, but where's everyone else? So Rabbi Shimon and his son, Rabbi Elazar, they had this incredible spiritual growth, being out of the physical world for 12 years. And when they came out, they weren't yet able to relate to everyone else. So Hashem sends them back in, because Torah is meant to make us more full of love, more full of understanding, not less. So they had more to learn. So they went back for another year, and they came out, and now we've got the son who still can't get over that people aren't where we are. His father says to him, you know what? And he had this attitude himself to a certain extent. Doesn't matter that everyone else is missing the point. You and I are enough for the world. We can make the world a better place. And if everyone else is misguided, that's their problem. Then came the third part of the story, where he meets this Jew running with the bundles of myrtle. And through this story, they were able to, through this meeting, this incident, they were able to realize, you know what? You can have people who love Hashem just as much as we do, who have a love for mitzvahs just as much as we do, but they've got their own way to do it. We connect to Hashem and show our love for Hashem through our study. But this person, look what he did. He went out, could have been a hot afternoon, and it was, instead of having a nice Shabbos, a nice nap before Shabbos, come refreshed, he was cutting myrtles, and he's running with them to make his wife happy, make his house beautiful and sweet smelling for Shabbos. He just expressed it in a different way. And then they understood, we don't all have to be the same. And we don't all have to be on the same point of our spiritual journey. We can all be at different stages. We can take different lengths of time to get where we're going. We can all take different detours. We can all be who we are, and we still have something special to offer, even if it's not the way that I would have done it. And to a certain extent, this was the opposite of Rabbi Akiva's students. Now, remember, he was also one of Rabbi Akiva's students. And unfortunately, the example that he saw as a very young student were these older students, more senior students who passed away. And it was only later in life he was able to come to this realization. I mean, I'm sure he had it to a certain extent, but to this point, he was able to have this understanding that we can all be unique and different, and we can have different mitzvahs that we put greater emphasis on. And although Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai didn't word it this way, I'm paraphrasing, but this idea that Judaism is more about the journey than it is about the destination. It's about how we travel more than how far we travel. I would very much like not to divide up the Jewish people. We don't divide Jewish people at all, but we don't want to divide the Jewish people into people who are at least outwardly more observant or outwardly less observant. If you were going to divide it, it should be those who want to and are trying to grow and those who aren't. And you can have people who are very outwardly very observant, but they're not interested in growing further. They've stagnated. Now, they may be keeping many mitzvahs, which is good, and it's certainly better than not keeping them, but their spiritual journey is not progressing. And then you can have someone else who, when it comes to how much they observe at the moment, now it's only, hopefully they're going to observe more, but they're growing. They have an enthusiasm. They have a want and a drive to grow. Their spiritual growth and their connection to Hashem can be far more engaged than the other person. And this is what they understood. And this really becomes part of Rabbi Shimon's legacy, which is the legacy of Lag BaOmer. And there's three primary, one of the customs is to light a bonfire, because it represents the light of Torah illuminating the darkness. And there's three main kavanas, three main intentions. There's obviously many more things, and every individual person has their own things that they're davening for, but three main ones. But one of them is the journey, to be able to have that the light that we should know, the guidance how to grow, to want to grow. So this is one of the three main ideas that Lag BaOmer represents. And we've gone a little over time. Any questions? Okay, well then, since we've already over the hour, we wish everyone incredible what's left of Lag BaOmer. You should absorb the spiritual energy of the day. And wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll see you next week from Phoenix and not Florida.
Beautiful class.
Bye-bye. Good
Rabbi.
job.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Beautiful class.
Beautiful
Thank you,
day, Lag
Rabbi.
BaOmer, everybody.
Thank you.
Good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.